We'll be interviewing Governor Lamont today, the day's editorial board. This is Sten Spinella, our Hartford reporter, Erica Moser, who covers business, Tim Dwyer, our publisher, and I'm Tim Carter, the executive editor. So, Governor, thanks for coming today and spending some time with us. Let's kick it off with a local question. There's a lot of opposition locally to the sale of the Mystic Oral School for $1. I believe you've received a letter from Attorney McCousher and Senator Summers and have received phone calls from Groton folks. So we wanted to take the opportunity to get an update from you today. Is there a review underway, or is it just?
Yeah, absolutely. At one point I thought the community was supportive. I understand not so much now. Some questions about the developer, something we inherited and took a look at. So my instinct is this thing's not going to go forward. We're going to revisit that. Like a lot of these things, Tim, there's always a question about who's responsible for the environmental remediation, and I know that was part of the discussion as well here. I've tried to be pretty aggressive on environmental remediation, make these properties suitable for, but first Groton's got to decide what they want to do with that piece of property. So I think we'll be going back to the community for their insights. So they want no housing at all, or something more modest. But I like to work with local communities wherever we can.
So are you saying you're reviewing it, or are you saying you're not going to go through with the deal?
The latter.
Has the deal already been, canceled or broken, or is that still to come?
I think there's so much dispute and potential suits in and around this thing. It's time to put it on pause, and that's just what we're going to do.
Just moving quickly onto the state pier, which.
Are you good with that or not? What do you think?
Me?
Yeah.
Am I running for governor?
I don't know. Does the day have a point of view? Do they say
we've
too
been-
much housing or not enough? What's?
Well, we're focusing on affordable housing right now. So we're doing a big project on that this year.
Yeah.
So that's what we're focusing on.
Good for you.
You mentioned the state pier, which we can see from where we're sitting. There's been some criticism that the deal the state has is that the state picks up all the cost overruns, which there has been some. Do you think that was a good deal?
I think in hindsight, look at the totality of this thing. It's a really good deal for the state and the region. I really do. Look, I didn't make the deal, and we had to make some changes with the Port Authority. I did that within the first 6 months when I took office. I think we've got a good team in place. Look, it's our pier. It's going to be, a publicly owned pier. And so to the credit of the folks who helped put this deal together, they got private utilities, Eversource and Ørsted, to contribute $75 million to the cost of this pier. Pretty big deal, I think. They're also going to rent us. They're going to pay us rent for access to the pier as long as they need it for wind power installations and the such. I think that's a good thing. They're also making the contributions to the city, which took a little back and forth, to tell you the truth, but I think we got there. So I think in hindsight, is that the deal I would have structured? No. Is it a good deal for the state? I think it is. There's a lot of talk about tearing up the contract and walking away. It's not the way you do business as a state. I want people that want to come back and continue to do business with the state of Connecticut.
One thing we've heard a lot from your opponent is him saying, he would have sat down with Eversource and Ørsted, with all these cost overruns. And what's your response to that for, his point of trying to make them, cover more of the cost overruns?
I think he said he'd walk away from the deal, and I'm not doing that. Like it or not, they made a deal with Eversource and Ørsted. I think in hindsight, you're going to find it's an extraordinary good deal, incredibly positive, what it means for development, what it means for jobs, what it means for energy independence, what it means for clean energy here. I think New London's got the opportunity to be what it once was, one of the great ports in the Northeast or on the Eastern Seaboard. we worked hard with Eversource and Orsted, early on. We got the $75 million contribution. And I can see, a little bit like what you mentioned in the Groton housing as well. I mean, the ferry wanted to change things around. Delays in terms of the permitting took a couple of years. With high inflation, that impacted things. Most importantly, we got $75 million contribution for a pier that we're going to own and control.
Question on the economy. We saw recently that the state's economy shrank 4.7% in the second quarter, a rank of 49th, and personal income growth in Connecticut ranked last. Why was Connecticut doing so much worse in the second quarter than Rhode Island, and what's your plan to turn that around?
Again, I'd ask you to take the lens back a little bit. Remember, for the first quarter, they said we're below average. Then they revisited those numbers, said you're second best in the country. So please keep this stuff in perspective. And secondly, we're, above average if you look back over, the last 12 months. These numbers go up and down. They change quite a bit. You see how dramatically it was. We'll take a look at where we end up. But I do pay attention. Let's face it. We're heading into some real recessionary headwinds. And we can talk about how I prepare for that, how the state prepares for that, and what that's going to mean for jobs and development. Right now, it's not impacted. Right now, we have more jobs that we know what to do with. And, I just came from Stony Indian High School, where we've got an apprentice program, kids lining up. Here it's in terms of home building and construction. So if we run into a recession, it's not going to be like when I was in the 70s, that stagflation. I think it's going to be, it's going to impact our revenues, which is why I'm very cautious about people spending away the rainy day fund. But I think it's still going to be a strong jobs market, and my job is to keep that growing. That's how you keep our GDP growing. And housing, frankly, is part of that. If there's not housing for these young workers, those jobs are going to go elsewhere.
Yeah, let me go off on the economy on the surplus. Your opponent has said he doesn't see how the surplus is translating to people's everyday lives. So could you say, how you think it is affecting the everyday citizen?
Who, the surplus?
Yeah, how does the surplus help people on a
Yeah, the politicians have wanted to spend this surplus away, and it's not a surplus, it's a rainy day fund that was set up on a bipartisan basis to make sure the state does not lurch from boom to bust like we have for the last 35 years. So I consider it incredibly irresponsible now of all times. Erica just asked me about the recession numbers. Now this is the time you want to hand out all that rainy day money right when we could be looking in the jaws of a recession. It's not going to happen on my watch. And how does it impact people's everyday life? I think we stand a decent balance there. What we've done in terms of workforce, like I was talking about, what we're doing in terms of affordable daycare and mental health and making the investments I need to help people be ready to get back to work and be able to get back to work going forward. And by the way, every time you say I'm going to gut the rainy day fund and spend that money elsewhere, that's another year or 10 that you're not paying down your pension obligations. I've been in this political game now for a while, and every 4 years like clockwork, people talk about kicking the can down the road when it comes to this, and now they want to kick the can down the road yet again on pensions. We paid down, almost $6 billion, and not only does that keep our commitment to the state employees who showed up every day during COVID and got the job done, it's going to save us $450 million a year. A year.
Okay, thank you for that.
You've referenced for the rainy day fund, you've talked about the 15% amount in terms of, relative to the budget. Is there a certain, if you see the rainy day fund, rising above that, is there a certain, whether it's a number or a percentage threshold at which point you would be more comfortable, spending down the rainy day fund on things other than for pension?
Right now, by law, under the volatility, it goes to the rainy day fund. This is, capital gains and bonuses. And otherwise, it does go down to pay the pension. I mean, if they want to go back to the legislature and say, I'm tired of paying down the pension, or I don't think we need a big rainy day fund, that is You know, I don't always sing the praise of the legislature, to be blunt, but I think this was something where they self-policed themselves. They said, I think we need the guardrails. And I think they did need the guardrails. You know, it's not just, my opponent. I mean, they wanted to use the rainy day fund to pay for transportation. Remember that a while ago? And now there are a lot of other ideas to spend down our rainy day fund, right? And you're looking at a recession. So I think they've got it about right. It's 15% of revenues. If you earned $100,000 a year, it's saying maybe you should have $15,000 in the bank just in case there's a rainy day.
You mentioned housing a couple times. And it seems in Connecticut it's difficult, whether you're a single mom, a young couple with good jobs, a senior citizen trying to hold on to their home, and everybody agrees it's a problem. What's the solution? What can the state do to address this?
Well, for the first time, Tim, in a long time, a lot of people want to move to the state of Connecticut. So, and I'm come out of the business world. I say make hay while the sun shines, because you can't take these times forever. Look what's going on with mortgage rates right now. I spent a lot of time with the business folks, and they say, next to workforce, its corollary is housing. If there's not housing for workforce housing for single folks, not just 3.1 kids in a house in the suburbs, but for single folks, a vibrant downtown like a downtown New London, I'm going to take these jobs elsewhere. So we've got to continue to build out our housing, especially in the downtown areas, especially in and around transit-oriented development. The pushback you get is I'm generally in favor of more housing, but not here. And I've gone back to the mayors. I said, I believe in local control. Tell me where you think the housing should go, and we'll follow your lead. And frankly, New London's been great at this. From my point of view, I mean, I was just looking at the numbers. I mean, you've got 1,400 units built or about to be built right now, and compared that to about 300 units over the last 10 years combined. I mean, people are rediscovering, A, what they love about Connecticut and what they love about New London. And obviously, a lot of what the construction you see out there is a big piece of the future here.
So you see it more as a municipal problem than something that the legislature or your administration would deal with, as far as zoning and those type of things that could make a difference. You'd rather
I want the towns to take the lead.
Right.
And I would say the overwhelming majority are, look at New London again. But not all of them are, Tim. Some of them are saying, not in my backyard. And then we said, well, come up with a plan and where you think maybe in and around the train you might like to do something. And, if they say no, then it's a tougher conversation, and the developers will probably have a seat at the table. But that's a last resort. Please come forward and tell us how you want to do it.
Your opponent wants to get rid of 830G. That's something we heard recently. Do you think it needs to be reformed, and do you think he has a point when he says it limits local control?
Look, I gave you what my plan is. You show us locals how you want to do it, and then 830G is irrelevant. So, yeah, then it probably does take a little bit of reform. The old days, you have to actually get the units built over a period of time. Nobody really wanted to build here in Connecticut over the last 30 years. That's not the fault of 830G. That's the fault of an economy that was flat as a pancake here. Now they want to do it. So just give us an idea on how you want to do it. Does that answer your question?
It does. I was just typing what you're saying. That's my job here. I also wanted to ask you, you guys have talked a lot about qualified immunity and this police accountability bill. So I have an idea of where you stand. Like, you have said that you don't want to look at it again, really. But why do you think it's important that qualified immunity was scaled back?
Pull the lens back just for 1 second. I mean, there's a lot of folks. I think we are one of the safest states in the country. You probably saw some of the crime statistics Ravella came out with in the last week or two. We're continuing to make progress there. continue to make progress in terms of violent crime, continue to make progress in terms of burglaries and property crime. You know, it's a good record, and that's thanks to, I have said a million times, one of the best police forces, you know, in the country. And that's state police. I've tried to hire, you know, every year since I was first elected, more state police. And I'm continuing to push the mayors. You know, they've got the resources now between our support and some federal support, get more community policing on the street. I think that's what the priorities are. You asked specifically about the criminal justice bill. Hey, the bill we passed this last year was on a very bipartisan basis, which I'm quite appreciative. You know, specifically, you know, the qualified immunity came after George Floyd, and all it says is if you purposefully knew that you were breaking the law, like your knee on somebody's throat for 9+ minutes, you will be held accountable. And 99.99% of our police do the right thing. If there's occasional, you know, they've got to be held accountable, just like I hold those repeat offenders accountable. And there's problems recruiting across our economy in the other 49 states. So I do think it's a cheap shot to blame the legislature's bill about that. But most importantly, show respect for the police.
That's well taken. Do you think that qualified immunity would make it more difficult to hold police accountable?
I think it just, legislature thought this important because it said to the community, you know, nobody is above the law. It's an incredibly high threshold, the same threshold they already have under federal. And I think I'm trying to build the very best trust between the police and the community. And that's like the most diverse group of police we've ever hired. So they reflect the diversity of the community and a sense that we're all playing by the same set of rules.
Another question on the police accountability bill. You know, I know it's something we've been talking a lot about with the state legislature races that we're all covering. I'm covering the 33rd Senate, for example, and I was talking to Senator Needleman, who did vote in favor of the bill, but he was talking about some of his concerns with the impact on the really tiny police departments where it's just a few people, maybe just a few resident troopers, and kind of the difficulties of taking a one-size-fits-all sort of approach that, you know, Essex, where he's first selectman, is very different than Hartford. So what have you seen with the impact of the police accountability bill on the really small departments, and do you think there is anything in that bill that's too burdensome for them, or any changes that should be made specifically for the smaller departments?
I haven't heard that issue at all. You know, George Floyd knee in the throat analogy is true for a very small department as for a very big department. That's sort of the very high threshold you've got. But Eric, if I'm missing something, if there's something specific to a small department that impacts them in a way that the legislature didn't anticipate, come to me and we'll make the reforms.
Do you guys have any questions you want to ask?
How would you grade yourself on freedom of information issues? You've come under some criticism for not you, but your administration being slow to fulfill those requests.
I guess I'd say two things. I think I'm one of the most transparent governors ever, in the sense that, you know, during COVID, I was on every afternoon at 4 o'clock, and I took every question till the cows come home. And I've done that every day outside of, you know, COVID as well. And I tell everybody where my meetings are going to be, where my events are, and I'm there to answer those questions. So I think your question is probably more specific to FOIA and reading everybody's emails and things like that. You know, I'll say, Tim, two things. I mean, A, we've been inundated. We have caught up now, inundated in the sense that I've got a FOIA person in the governor's general counsel office, all across our departments, just to keep up with the requests that are made. And, you know, the requests used to be very narrow and tailored, you know, Ned, I want to hear every conversations you've ever had about state peer with Erica or something. Now it's, I want to hear, you know, something that will involve, say, 1,000 emails. So I have to go through them. That's what our FOIA people do to make sure you're not compromising some, job recruitment or company recruitment, things that could really compromise. They never want to do business with the state again. So if we got to do better on that, I will, because I know you're concerned and others. I want to be able to get in real time the information you need. I think you're finding I've added on a bunch of people that do nothing but FOIA, and I hope that backlog is clearing up.
I have a follow-up question on that, because I'd seen that Andrew Brown at the Connecticut Mirror had tweeted this morning that he just got done sending out emails seeking updates on 5 different FOIA requests. Many of those FOIAs were submitted over 2 months ago. None of them are that complicated. The lack of deadlines for government officials in Connecticut makes the process so much more difficult. Is there any sort of process in place for the government, for your agencies, to kind of get sort of the less complicated requests out of the way, or do you think there's more that could be done to kind of not have to be waiting months on something that is one of the simpler requests?
Yeah, none of them are that simple, but I've tried to add on people to do it simpler.
Spectrum, so.
But the only thing I'd ask is narrow the request, and that makes it a lot easier. If they have to go through what, all you do is word search Gold Star Bridge, and let's say there's 500 emails in and around. If you narrow it down to my conversations with somebody else related to a specific period of time, or even better, a specific issue, then we can respond very quickly. And I hope we are, and if we're not, we're going to get a lot faster at it. If it's every email you've ever had with Mulaney, it takes a little longer.
Somewhat related, we have a local guy, Kevin Blacker, I think you've heard of him, who's running on the Green Party ticket for Congress. He's alleged that he was, when he painted the signs over at the State Pier, that he was arrested by the Major Crimes Unit, and he's alleging that you were involved in assigning that investigation to the Major Crimes Unit, that you used your personal cell phone to get involved in that process.
He's just making up stuff. I barely know who this person is, but there's not a word of truth to any of that. Go ahead, FOIA me.
I'm going to change the subject a bit unless there's anything else you want to ask on this. Okay. On abortion, you told Stefanowski last week in a quote that a lot of people have used that he was scaring the women of Connecticut. So I wanted to ask you, how do you think he's doing that other than the donation to Leora Levy? Because you've made that point before. But do you think there's any rhetoric or positions that he's held in the past that back up what you said?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as that Dobbs decision came down, he was silent, and then he started calling for some restrictions in and around Roe v. Wade, in particular regarding notification. Family Institute cheered on the fact that Bob Stefanowski is their guy. They want to outlaw women's right to choose. He's got a couple of PACs, I shouldn't say he's got, but there are a couple of PACs that are very supportive of him, that are very clear about greatly restricting or outlawing, in this case, Roe v. Wade, and great restrictions on gay rights and other liberties. So we put in place a safe harbor so that if somebody came to the state of Connecticut seeking, full range of reproductive rights, including abortion, that Texas couldn't sue them and bring them back. His running mate said, I support that. He said, I won't comment on that. So I think he's left the door open to people wondering, can they really trust him when push comes to shove? And yeah, Leora Levy and the other person running, he could have donated to a pro-choice candidate for Senate in the Republican primary. He decided to only support the two ones that want to outlaw it in the state of Connecticut as well as across the country.
Do you think he's being disingenuous when he says that he's pro-choice?
I don't like to characterize other people's point of view. I just gave you why I think people have some questions whether they can really trust them. If let's face it, with the court cases coming up, there are going to be a lot of challenges to our legislation, and you want to know where a governor's going to stand when those challenges start washing over the transom.
You were in the business world, obviously, and doing pretty well. Now this is twice that you've self-funded a campaign for governor, and somebody asked me, why would anyone do that? So why would you do that? Why would you spend a lot of your own money to become a governor?
Because governor gives you an opportunity to make a big difference in a state you love. Pure and simple. I don't think I'd be a very good congressman or senator and legislator and taking orders from Mitch McConnell or Chuck Schumer. Governor, I think I can make a case saying they made a big difference in the last 4 years about how people perceive the state, how we're beginning to get our fiscal house in order, the rewards of that with tax cuts, a new relationship with the business community. And so, yeah, I've put some money in. My opponents put some money in, and we're in the arena trying to make a difference.
Do you think that it's difficult for people who are not wealthy to run for governor in Connecticut? Do you think it's easier to be wealthy and, like yourself from the business world, to run for the highest office in the state?
Probably a little easier. I mean, thankfully, and I think it's appropriate, we've got public financing. Maybe notice that it's public financing, I think, is still working at the legislative and the constitutional level. They haven't used it at the gubernatorial level now for a couple of cycles. It's not like I was the first or Bob was the first. The numbers have gotten bigger, and you don't get the resources it's a little too slowly. And frankly, everybody's end running it anyway with the PACs and the RGA and the DGA. I just don't think it's keeping the big money out of politics.
We focus mostly on local issues as an editorial board, but there are probably 3 issues that we look at nationally, and that's protecting democracy, gun rights, and also voting rights. I myself am gravely concerned about the future of our democracy. I think we all should be on high alert that we're on the precipice of losing our rights, and some people in the country willingly giving away their rights to follow one person or 2 people or a group of people. So in Connecticut, it's a little different than it is in the rest of the country. Feel a little safer here, but we're part of the country, and if democracy fails, we're part of that. So can you talk a little bit about all those 3 national issues?
Yeah, you asked that really well. First of all, our democracy is under threat. You can't take this stuff for granted. Oh, we've been around for 250 years. Everything's fine. This is just a little speed blip. And then you see how nonchalant I think a lot of the Republicans were about January 6th and not being as outraged and speaking out as strong as they could. I just knocked Mitch McConnell. I'll say I think he's been pretty good on this issue, and he's been strong, and Chris Murphy's trying to put in place some bipartisan legislation to make sure people won't be able to contradict the next election in 2024. It's right here in Connecticut. I mean, I and Stephanie Thomas, the Democratic candidate for Secretary of State, want to do everything we can to expand people's opportunity to vote, including absentee ballot. You know what's on the ballot this November in terms of early voting. She's running against somebody who wants to make it a little tougher to vote, a little more complicated to vote. I want people to have a stake in the outcome. I want them to have voted. I think that means they have a stake in their state, or as you point out, in their country going forward. So I'd like to see Congress speak with one voice on that topic. And Chris is really working hard across the aisle there. What were you said? Guns, I think.
Voting rights and gun safety.
Well, voting rights I tried to address a little bit in terms of what we're doing. Gun safety, what we're doing is working. It's not perfect, and bad stuff's going to happen, but look at our crime rate compared to those states, say those southern states where they don't have the same gun safety laws. Look at our crime rate, dramatically less compared to those states that don't provide the same training and support for their state police or municipal police. It is night and day. It's dramatic. And I like to do things that work. I'm not looking to stir the political pot and just get a political issue, but I think what we're doing is working. And we got some things done in our bipartisan crime bill, but not as much on guns, just because that's such a political hot potato. But I'll be blunt. I think it's something I want to revisit, in particular when it comes to those illegal guns. There are more illegal guns on the street today than ever before. And I'm not worried about the legal gun owners. They seem to have their stuff together and are working pretty well. I'm terrified of the illegal guns, in particular those ghost guns. They're untraceable. They're often assault-style things. You put them together in 5 pieces and they're out on the street, and it's making our communities a lot less safe. And I hear that from the police every day.
Can I ask you about guns really quick? What from this last session did you want to get done on guns that you didn't get done that you want to revisit in this upcoming session?
It's sort of what I was just saying to Tim. Let's start with the ghost guns. At least let's register all of them, when they come into the state, or those that you already have in the state. I don't think we should have them at all, but I'll be blunt about it. Whatever I think doesn't matter if all my neighboring states are doing it. But at least I can start holding people accountable. If I see somebody carrying around a ghost gun in a public square and looking a little menacing, I'd like our cops to be able to say, can you show me you've got permission to carry that anyway? Little things like that I think would make a difference.
I wanted to talk about crime rates. The 2021 crime stats came out a week ago, and I know Democrats were really touting that, overall crime was down, violent crime was down, and Connecticut is one of the safest states in the country overall. But the fact remains that the biggest crime, murder, was up, that there was a large uptick in 2020 and upticked a little bit more in 2021. So in terms of addressing, increases in murders, gotta first look at what the problem is. What has your administration been doing or your department's been doing to kind of look at, why there was an uptick in murders?
I think there are 2 more murders when you say uptick.
But for
But
2020,
you're right.
it's
You're
still
right.
up.
You're right.
2020 was up,
Yep.
so by a lot more.
Way down compared to the last 10 and 20 years. But look, I'm very concerned. And these numbers are, Hartford, the murder rate is way up. New Haven, the murder rate is way down. And it often reflects, 2 or 3 gang members or something as isolated as that. The bigger thing is there are too many damn guns in the street, too many illegal guns in the street, too many guns that have high-capacity magazines that can kill people. I also look, Erica, at just broadly speaking, the mental health and all the distress and the extreme behavior coming out of COVID. But I think that's more reflected in some of the other crimes and the fast driving and things. I think murder, a lot of that is gang-related. The other thing we've done on our bipartisan crime bill is, I got a lot more judges, a lot more prosecutors, and those judges now know whether that's a first-time offender, some knucklehead who did something stupid, or somebody who's done this 4 times before. 4 times before, we're getting them off the street. They're unsafe to themselves, and more importantly, they're unsafe to the community. Anything else on that one?
What do you say also to the people, some people who are, had a lot of issues with the police accountability bill, say that, that really negatively impacted the morale of police officers, that it makes it harder to recruit. What do you say to that, and what have you been seeing from local police departments on kind of just the past, 2 years or so on recruiting?
I think there's some trial attorneys and some politicians who are stirring up a lot of misinformation regarding the police accountability bill. I don't think any cases have been brought, and we're in, October now. I heard all the worries people had before. I'll say, when it comes to crime, Governor, you think the numbers say we're relatively safe and doing a little better than we were before, but I don't hear that from people. I hear they're really anxious about crime. Yeah, because you're crying fire in a crowded theater and then asking if people are more anxious. I urge the political rhetoric, slow down. We got a bipartisan bill done. I hope to do something again on that next cycle as well.
Staying on national politics. It's a couple of years away, but can you say today that you're supportive of President Biden having another term, or would you take more of a wait-and-see approach on that?
Look, if it's Trump v. Biden, I'm with Biden if he's 90. I'll be blunt about it. I thought the difference between that was night and day. If you're saying it's if it's a different race, let's wait and see. But I'd cut a little slack to the president. I mean, he's not Winston Churchill, and sometimes it's a long day. But I think it was one of the most effective 2 years our federal government's had in a long time. I say that as a governor. Look at a State Pier. Right behind that is Gold Star Bridge. Every president since Ike has been talking about we've got to rebuild our 100-year-old infrastructure or else we're not going to be able to compete with the Chinese and it's unsafe. You know, this guy got it done. And for particularly a state like Connecticut where everything is so damn old, it's really important. You know, I'm going to be able to take 20 minutes off of people's commute by car and by rail, depending on where you're going. Take that to account. You know, maybe people say the American Rescue Plan, you know, went a little too far. It was 2 months, you know, into his administration. He got that done. Remember, COVID was still raging, and now it's recovery money. And I'm able to use that to hold down healthcare costs. I'm able to use that to expand daycare and childcare. And it buys us a little time to get back to our new normal.
I think the strongest democracies are the ones with the best educated citizens, and I'm concerned about our education system, not only in the towns around here, but also in the country and the state. My son goes to East Lyme High School, and there are teachers there who are afraid to teach current events because of what happens to parents' reactions when they do that, no matter what they say about it. Local school boards here have been inundated by parents saying the parents should have more say in the curriculum than the school board, and that they don't want certain things taught or certain histories, subjects taught. So what can we do to help the teachers teach properly, and what is the parents' role in crafting or their input on curriculum?
Well, every teacher will tell you you got to be there alongside the parents. You got to be working with the parents. You want parents involved in the school. You know, when it comes to curriculum, I think that's why we have a board of education. I think they're sort of popularly elected. I assume it's a lot of parents who are electing folks. And I see a lot of back and forth in a few of our, local boards of education. I'd also urge people to be careful. A little like with our police, I think we have one of the best school systems in the country, and that's reflecting the fact that the best and the brightest still want to go into education. And I've heard a lot of the stories like you have, Tim, about maybe people don't respect me and how I would teach some complicated subjects. Maybe teaching's not for me. And I think that's 100% wrong. I want to make sure that the best and the brightest continue to want to go into teaching and play to our strengths. I mean, I don't know what CRT is. Are we spending too much time talking about the Holocaust in 7th grade history, or I shouldn't talk about slavery before they're in 9th grade? These are not little snowflakes, and our teachers know how to teach this in a way that generates critical thinking. And I don't want to take away their opportunity to do that, but I want them to do it with a full understanding of the parents. That's how things work the best.
A lot of the towns around New London are 50-50 or almost 50-50 Republican and Democrat. So how important is this area of the state for you to win for the election?
Well, I love you, man, but it's no more important than the other parts of the state. But more importantly...
I don't think that was the right answer.
No, okay, sorry, damn. Cut that out. All right. Look, I represent all the folks. I'm a business guy, so I do pretty well with the Republicans. I think Republicans looked at our debate the other day and saw two people wanted to spend down the rainy day fund, and they said, I'm not sure who the Republican is on this stage. Somebody's being fiscally conservative and cautious. I take that to heart. But more importantly, I can't afford to play politics. You know, you're a governor. You represent all the people. And if I don't have the respect of business as well as labor, teachers as well as parents, the state becomes ungovernable. And I've worked every day my heart out to earn the respect of all the competing constituencies that may be out there right now. And I'd love nothing more to go into Republican groups be they at the Durham Fair, or the booth, or venues, or local chambers, or places where maybe wouldn't be inclined. I'm happy to put my background up against anybody. I come out of small business. I don't come out of big business. I don't come out of finance. I come out of small business where we work through good times and bad times together. I knew, especially my official, the original 50 or so, workers and their families there. I live with them. I live with them in good times and bad times. I paid special attention to small business during COVID. I mean, I know what it's like. It's not a lot in that shoebox, and 2 months, you're out of money and everything goes. So we paid special attention to that community in particular to make sure that when we got on the backside of COVID, they were able to hit the ground running again. I think we did pretty well on that front.
I wanted to put this question to you because you didn't get to respond during the debate last week. Stefanowski said that he didn't think barring trans students from participating in certain events or teams or whatever, he didn't think that was a radical position. So I want to know if you think that's a radical position or if you think that's something that, there is room for discussion on.
Yes, but discuss it with the local leagues and discuss that with the local boards. I don't need a lot of politicians jumping in 6 weeks before an election, stirring up a lot of tensions and animosity at the expense of 3 or 4 kids who are going through a very complicated time in their lives. I just wish the politicians would step back on this one and let the locals figure it out, because I think they're doing a pretty good job of it.
Anybody else? I think that was a signal that they started banging on the state pier that the road was done.
The sound of progress.
Well, I guess I had one more.
Go ahead.
I'm always interested in talking about labor shortages because I've written about that a bunch, and I know that's come up. I was at the CBIA event. One thing in particular I was interested about was nurses. That I know that's a particularly complicated issue because there's also just not enough. It's not even just that there's not enough nurses; it's that there's not enough instructors. There's not enough teachers, even for the number of people who would want to go into a nursing program. So just looking at that as one specific example, what is Connecticut doing, or what do you think Connecticut could do better to increase the nursing and overall healthcare workforce?
Yeah, we desperately need more nurses, desperately need a lot of folks. I think our credentialing process is way over the top. And everybody says you don't have 4 years of this or 3 years of that. And we sped that up. You probably saw the program we put in place down at Southern, where in a year we'll provide $10,000 in tuition support. We'll provide all the testing support you need. You can do this in, I think it's 12 months, something like that, and start earning while you're learning, get there into the hospitals. I'm having a hard time retaining nurses for a couple of reasons. One, there's not enough nurses. So all of a sudden they're on overtime and double overtime, and they're burning out. This coming on the backside of 2 years of COVID where they showed up every day. So that's why I'm trying to make it easier and faster to become a nurse, paying them a little more, paying the counselors a little more, paying the therapists a little more, paying a lot of those folks that are in really short supply, way to say we respect you and we need you, and it'll make it easier for you to become a nurse.
Yeah, on work shortages, you said during last week's debate that we need to get 1,000 new workers up to electric boat over the course of the next 12 months. Is there something that the state is doing to help that process, to help EB on that specific goal?
Yeah. No, we, our workforce board's working closely with EB, coming up with programs and curriculums. And again, these are not 2-year community colleges or 4 years. These are 18, 24-week programs in laser welding, whatever that skill might be. And it's remarkable. The first time, in my life, as I said the other day, that you come out and you know your stuff, you've got a guaranteed job, good paying job. I mean, $70,000 a year, good benefits, pretty, you can count on it for the next 20 years. These are a once in a lifetime opportunity. And so you're right. If people say, is that a priority for me? Absolutely. Probably my number one priority. A is a business guy. I got to make sure that they have the workers they need so they can continue to build the submarines on time, on schedule, or else those opportunities are going to go elsewhere. I understand that. And 2 is somebody who cares deeply as a progressive business person. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to lift everybody up. I mean, I want to make sure that that kid at the high school I was just at or wherever, regardless of your zip code, regardless of your background, there is a job for you. It's an opportunity really to rebuild the middle class in a way that we went the other direction for about the last generation or 2.
All right, well, Governor, thank you again for coming down and talking to us.
Great. Nice to see you. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, good to see you.